everyone. I'm Delvin, Demand Generation Manager here at Fingerprint, and I'm really excited to welcome you all to today's session focused on real-time bot detection and defense with Fingerprint. Bots have been around for years, but what we're seeing now is a different level of sophistication. We're seeing credential stuffing, large-scale scraping, automated account creation, and these attacks are built to look like everyday user sessions, sliding past CAPTCHAs and rate limits. And that's what makes it critical to understand how they work and what signals can reveal them in real time. So presenting today's session, we have Senior Developer Evangelist Keshia Rose. Keshia empowers developers to build secure and seamless online experiences with demos and technical content to help fight fraud. Before I hand it over to Keshia, I just want to cover a few things with you all. Today's session is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be shared with you after the webinar. If you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box below, and we'll leave some time at the end to answer them. So, Keshia, I think we're ready for you. Take it away.
Sounds good. Thanks, Delvin. All right. Hello, everyone. As Delvin said, we're going to be talking about blocking bad bots today with Fingerprint. Again, my name is Keshia Rose. There we go. Senior Developer Evangelist here at Fingerprint, and I like to help developers build secure and seamless user experiences. Now, today we're going to be talking about a few things. We're going to be going over some bot basics. Then we're going to talk about how Fingerprint can help you to detect and block bots. I'm going to show you a live demo of showing you how to implement Fingerprint and seeing that detection action and happening. And then we're going to talk about some additional defense strategies as well and use cases. Now, first up, bots aren't always bad. We do rely on some good bots every day for things like search engine indexing or uptime monitoring. Those are legitimate, helpful bots. But there are also some increasing waves of bad bots that we're seeing here, right? They're trying to do nefarious things, not really being helpful. Maybe it's credential stuffing scripts that are trying out stolen passwords from a data breach. Perhaps it's web scrapers trying to harvest content or proprietary data, or inventory hoarding, trying to snap up some kind of limited edition products or, those high value concert tickets before real customers can. But as of last year, these types of bad bots, they accounted for about a third. Actually, I think it's a little bit more than a third of all web traffic, right? That's all web traffic is these bad bots. And that number, unfortunately, keeps climbing. And what makes it challenging to detect these is that modern bots are built to look and behave like real human users. They rotate through IP addresses, whether that's, through some kind of proxies or using residential proxies, for example, where they actually look like real users. And they even simulate normal browser behavior. And unfortunately, now with AI, that's making it even easier to do, whether that's by acting on behalf of fraudsters, right? They can set them up to automate tasks, or they can help you actually create these bots to begin with, providing you the code or the scripts to use to run as bots. Now, traditional tools like CAPTCHAs or even rate limits really aren't enough anymore. Now, these bad bots are kind of used for all kinds of different things, depending on, your industry, your use case, your website, your application. You may see some or all of these types of things. Now, I mentioned the first few here already, but in addition to that, bots can create fake accounts, right? They can create multiple fake accounts very quickly, very easily, maybe to abuse free trials or to manipulate referral programs, right? They can pretend to be a new customer when really it's just a bot making a new account. Some other common attacks include carding bots that test stolen or even fake credit card numbers, right? They'll do a bunch of small purchases to try and see if they can find valid credit card details and then use that to make fraudulent purchases. We've got things like ad and click fraud bots that drain marketing budgets or skew metrics, making you think that your ads are doing great, but really it's just, a bot trying to suck up all the money you've put into your ad campaign. Maybe it's about spam or fake content, fake reviews, misinformation. Bots are an easy way to kind of spew that type of content across multiple different platforms. Or things like coupon or loyalty abuse, right? Bots that try and reuse or mass redeem promo codes or harvest rewards, right? This list can go on and on and on. The more things you can think about that you can do on the web, I'm sure, is some kind of bot to take advantage of that action or be nefarious. Now, these targeted different attacks, they cover a whole bunch of areas, whether it's logging in, account security, payment fraud, checkout fraud, managing content, making it a good experience for your users, marketing spend, all over the place. But unlike humans, these bots, they tend to do these things a lot faster, right? These things aren't necessarily specific to bots. A human user could try and abuse your promo program, but bots, of course, do these things in a much faster way, and they are relentless. They will run all day and night trying to accomplish these attacks. Now, with all these different types of attacks, how are the bots managing to slip past these standard or traditional defenses? Like I mentioned before, modern bots, they tend to rotate through IP addresses, right? They route traffic through residential proxies. So what I mean by that? So let's say, for example, you download and install a free VPN, right? You want to maybe, I don't know, watch a streaming network that's not available in your country or something like that, and you've downloaded some free VPN. Oftentimes, some of these free VPNs kind of come with an additional feature that maybe you didn't request, which allows fraudsters or really anyone else to access your network and use it as a proxy, basically. So that's what we mean by residential proxy. Now it looks like the request is coming from a legitimate IP address because it's your IP address. It's very normal. It's not some kind of IP network somewhere else. It looks like it's coming from a real person. These bots also tend to run in, headless browsers, things like Selenium or Puppeteer. They use stealth add-ons to try and hide the indicators that would maybe normally give them away with some of the traditional methods. And they might even script realistic mouse movements or click behavior that mimics what a human would do. They have even tiny details like the scroll speed or like the way your cursor, your mouse kind of jitters, the way your hand wouldn't naturally move. Those types of things can be simulated to make it seem like the bot is actually a human user. And now things like CAPTCHAs, rate limits that used to work, these are pretty easily bypassed nowadays. I don't know if you know this, but bots can now solve CAPTCHAs. Honestly, they probably can solve them better than I can, honestly. They can dodge rate limits as well. They can, like I said before, spread those requests across thousands of different IP addresses or different accounts. So it's a lot harder to catch them. So, just turning up the CAPTCHA difficulty or tightening your rate limits based on IP addresses will probably just frustrate your real users long before you actually stop any of these determined bots. And modern defenses need more than just IP addresses or user agent or header checks. Now, how does Fingerprint actually help you to detect and block bots? Well, Fingerprint detects bots in real time using device intelligence. Basically, instead of looking at just IP addresses or basic headers, user agents, that kind of thing, we analyze over 100 different browser and device signals in real time. Now, each signal on its own may not be that important, but together we can analyze them and detect different patterns that can indicate things like a bot or some kind of automated tool. And this means that you can get a real-time verdict on every visitor to your site or application, right? So for every visitor to your site, we can tell you if it's a good bot, like a search engine, like a known search engine crawler, a bad bot, which is likely to do some kind of nefarious tactics, some kind of automation that you don't want, or if no bot has been detected. Now, all of this happens behind the scenes. There's no extra steps or puzzles or hurdles for your end users to have to jump through. And you can use that verdict immediately to either block bot activity, challenge it. Maybe you want to make sure, you want to step up the challenge or some kind of additional friction. Or maybe you want to allow the traffic depending on your use case, but you might want to maybe log or monitor that traffic and understand what's going on your website. Now, fingerprint smart signals tend to go beyond just bot detections. That's just one of our 20 plus smart signals. So while we do offer over 100 different signals for you to use for your risk analysis, you can think of our smart signals as kind of these like higher level signals. They are bundling together a bunch of inputs using a bunch of things like machine learning and pattern detection to give you some insight into your visitors, right? They give you some additional actionable context about the visitors. And you'll get visibility into things like virtual machine or emulator use, browser tampering, VPN, proxy, Tor detection. We also have things like velocity signals showing if a visitor is changing their IP address really frequently. Maybe they're doing some kind of impossible travel. Their country is changing frequently. And these kinds of signals, when they're combined together, can help to reveal patterns that traditional tools would miss. And they also let you decide on those decisions, right? Block, challenge, allow, in a way that gives you a lot more context, a lot more control to make the right decision. And again, all of this runs quietly in the background, right? This added context, not only is it seamless, it doesn't bother your end users, but it also makes it easier for you to, decrease your false positives and provide better protection on your website in general. Now, in addition to our smart signals, we also offer fingerprint identification via our visitor ID. This basically gives you a reliable way to recognize every single visitor that comes to your site, and it provides this through a persistent identifier. Now, that identifier is stable over time, and even if someone switches to incognito mode, even if they clear their cookies, even if they connect through a VPN, right? They change their IP address, you can still confidently recognize that same visitor that's coming to your site. Now, each visitor produces that visitor ID and then allows you to link sessions together. So, for example, if we're talking about bot activity or even just repeated abuse activity, not only will the bot detection help you to detect automated tooling, but the visitor ID can also help you to link those different actions together. So you can stop abuse, and it's a lot more reliable than things like IP address to actually monitor a visitor's nefarious activity. Now, setting up Fingerprint to actually block bots is pretty straightforward, and this is what I'm going to show you today in our demo. The first thing you do is add the Fingerprint JavaScript agent to your front end, and then you're going to say, hey, Fingerprint, I want to identify this visitor, right? Maybe when they're making a purchase or when they're logging in, some kind of key action that you want to protect with our bot detection or visitor ID or any of our smart signals. Then in the back end, you're going to get that full visitor identification event. And that's going to have all the different smart signals that you want to look at, the visitor ID, all this extra information you can use to make decisions, whether that's to block the action, to challenge it, or to proceed as normal. Now, I'm going to be showing you this implementation. We're going to go through some code in the live demo, but don't worry if you're not technical, if you're not familiar with coding. I promise I won't go too in depth, and I'll just give you an idea of how to implement Fingerprint in general. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to swap over here, and we will get into the demo. All right. So let me make sure I got my Zoom things out of the way here. There we go. Okay, so in today's demo, we are going to be protecting a login page. Okay, so we've got this very basic login page. You'll see as I go through, I really have kept this as minimal as possible. So if I log in here, let's say I use the right credentials. I log in. And all this page is going to do is say, yep, you've logged in successfully. Okay, we're not going to go to any other pages. There's no profile page or anything like that. I'm keeping the demo very, very, very simple. You'll also see this in the code as well, just to give you an idea of how to implement Fingerprint. So when we've logged in successfully, we get this little green message, logged in successfully, great. Let's say I was to put in the wrong password and I try to log in. Login failed because I have the wrong credentials. Now, right now, this page is not protected by Fingerprint. It's not checking any bot detection. It's not checking for any abuse, trying to log in over and over and over again. So I could just keep logging in multiple times here, and it's never going to stop me from doing that. I could keep trying a bunch of different credentials until I maybe find the right one. Okay. Now, also, if I hop over here to the code, I'm going to go through this in a second. But before I do, I want to let you know that we have also a bot detection or a bot script here as well. So if I open up that bot script, I'm using Puppeteer, and I also have the Stealth plugin activated here as well. And my little bot script, I'm going to be using this today to show you the before and after with turning on the fingerprint bot detection. But basically, just to give you an idea of what this script does, it's going to launch a headless browser. So it's not going to be seen, you're not going to see the browser. It'll launch a headless browser. And then I have a list of credentials here. And we can kind of pretend like I got this list of credentials in some kind of data breach. Maybe some other website got hacked and the credentials for that site have been leaked. And now I'm trying to see if people have reused their password on some other website, right? So I'm going to try and go through all these credentials on this login page. It's going to go through the inputs, add the username and password, and then it'll check that little message, right? The little green or red message to see if I was successful. If I was successful, then it's going to save the username and password so that I can log into later and do all kinds of terrible, nefarious things. So right now, like I said, the page is not protected. So I'm going to go ahead and run this script, and you'll see down here the output of the script based on those credentials that I showed you earlier. So some of them are going to fail because we have the wrong credentials. Those people maybe didn't use the same password on a different site. This is a reminder, if you're using the same password on multiple sites, please don't. Make sure you're using different passwords on different sites. However, for the folks that didn't do that, we see that we did successfully log in to some of these accounts. And then in my successes text file here, I've got those successful passwords. And now if I was a fraudster, right, you can imagine that I could go through and exfiltrate data, funds, make purchases, etc. Okay, so now we've got that. We know how to test it. We've got our server running. Let's go through and actually add Fingerprint to protect this login page. So the first thing we need to do is actually load the fingerprint agent, load the library, and we're going to do that right here at the top of the page. Now, I've just commented out this code. If you're not familiar with code, anything that's in these like light gray kind of with the 2 slashes at the beginning, basically is saying ignore, right? We're just ignoring that code. So the code exists, but it's not actually running. So as I go through, all I'm going to do is just uncomment that code and activate the fingerprint protections. So first thing I'm doing is to load the fingerprint library and initialize that client. And that needs to happen the instant you load the page, right? That should be like one of the first things you do is to load that library and make sure it's ready for you to use when you want to. We're actually going to use it down here in the handle login function. So this function is what's actually going to run when I click login. Okay, that's what's actually running here. And in here, you can see I'm grabbing the username and password, and then I'm sending it off to this endpoint on my server called /API/login. And I'm just sending over the username and password to log that person in, right? I'm going to check it in, and they make sure that the credentials are correct, and then they'll log in. Great. Now, next thing I want to do is actually to uncomment this piece here because I want to actually use Fingerprint to identify this visitor. Now, just loading this script, loading the Fingerprint library is not going to identify the visitor. You want to wait until you actually are ready to make that identification request when some kind of key action happens. In this case, when it's the login button is clicked, In other cases, it could be when you're trying to redeem a coupon code, or if you're trying to, make a new account, for example, make a purchase. That's when you want to make that identification request. And to do that, we're using this get function. That's what's saying to Fingerprint, hey, I want you to collect all those 100+ signals, and then I want you to send those signals over and determine, all those different smart signals that I mentioned before, generate the visitor ID, get all those details, and I want to access that data information later. Now, we're not going to send you all of that detail right here in your front end because the front end is very open. Anyone can access that. We'll send you a few things. Maybe we'll send you things like our confidence in our identification. We'll send you the visitor ID, but we also will send you this request ID. Now, this request ID changes every single time you make a request, and it's basically an identifier for that specific response. And then you can use that identifier later on to get the full identification data. So I'm also going to add the request ID here in this response that gets sent to our server. Going to go ahead and save that. And now we're going to move to the file that's running our server. And here you can see we have that exact same API login endpoint. Excuse me. Here as well, I'm going to uncomment the request ID so that it gets passed all the way through to my attempt login function. This is a function that I have in another file just to kind of keep things clean and tidy. We'll go ahead and save that. And now let's take a look at that attempt login file. Okay, so this is really where the magic happens. You see I've got a bunch of uncommented or commented code that I'll get back to in a second. But right now, all we're doing is we're getting the information about the username and we're checking if the password matches. I should caveat here, I am doing the most basic version of password checking here. Obviously, you shouldn't store passwords in your database directly in plain text. Again, this is just for the demo, but all it does is just check to see that the password matches. If it doesn't match, we return a false success message here. And if it does, then you're great. We continue on and we return true. Okay, that's all that's happening right now. Okay, so let's start adding Fingerprint to our application here. So now they're on the server side of things. I want to add the server client. So I'm going to go ahead and import the Fingerprint server client, and then I'm going to initialize it. And you'll see here we're using the Fingerprint secret key. You might have noticed on the front end, I have my public key here. I am using our public CDN. You probably would not want to use this for a production implementation. You want to use your own proxy integration. But this public key is different from our secret API key. This is the one that you want to use on the server side. You want to keep this secure, right? Don't show this anywhere public. This is what allows you to get that full identification data. I'm also going to make sure to include the request ID here in the function signature because it's getting passed to me from the server. And now I can use that request ID to get the full identification event. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually get that event. We're using the client here, get event with the request ID. And then from this event, I can pull out the visitor ID. Now let me show you what is actually being returned to you in this event, because a lot of things going on here. So if I swap over here, let's take a look at our playground. So you can actually go to this page yourself. It's at demo.fingerprint.com and then click on playground. And here's a really easy way to see all of our smart signals and the data that we return in that full identification request. So you can see things about my device, right? I'm not in incognito mode. I'm not a bot. Oh, thank goodness. I'm not using VPN, all these kinds of things. I have a high activity device because I am on this page a lot. Who knew? But you also can see at the very bottom of this, the full server API response. So we see this is my unique visitor ID. If I open this page in incognito, you would see the exact same visitor ID. But this request ID changes each time you request identification, right? That's what we're using to get this entire response. So what I did before here, this visitor ID is in events, the products identification data, right? So here we have it, products identification data, there's visitor ID. So this is just a representation of the data that I'm getting on the back end, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. We're not going to use all of this today. You can see we've got all kinds of things in here like VPN detection, torrent detection. If you were using a mobile device, we can do things like factory reset time, free to use, all kinds of things are in here. But I'm going to be focusing mostly on just this visitor ID, which is that unique browser or device identifier, as well as this bot D or our bot detection response. Specifically, if we look at bot D data bot result, we'll see not detected, but I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Let's just focus on the visitor ID for right now. Now, at the very bottom of this page, I've got two little helper functions that are already existing in here that I use to log a login attempt using my visitor ID. So basically, I can say, hey, the user tried to log in. I can log if it was successful or not. And then that way, I can also retrieve how many times they have tried to log in the last, let's say, 24 hours. Of course, this would change based on your own use case, but for today's demo, we'll just say for the last 24 hours, how many times has this user tried to log in? Now, if you weren't using Fingerprint, you might tie this to an IP address, you might tie this to an account, but those things can easily change, right? If I have my bot that we're using down here, I'm trying a bunch of different accounts, so you may not detect the multiple failed logins if you're only tracking that based on the account, for example, or with the IP address. As soon as I change my IP address, I get to start over all over again. So with the visitor ID, you have a much more stable way of actually doing some rate limiting on the login attempts. So I'm going to go ahead and log the attempts here. We're going to say we log a false attempt or a failed attempt here if the credentials are incorrect. And then if all our checks above are successful, then we'll still log in the attempt, but we'll put 1 as our success, right? So 0 for fail, 1 for success, and we'll also use the visitor ID. Now I have that get recent login attempts function, so I'm going to uncomment this section here. And what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if the number of login attempts that happened recently, right, the last 24 hours, is equal to or greater than 5, right? If you do 5 or more login attempts, now we're thinking something suspicious and you've done too much. You don't want to limit someone on a couple of login attempts. Maybe you made a typo, you forgot your password, right? But there's going to be some number, depending on your use case, your site, some number they're going to say, okay, now it's starting to look suspicious. In our example, I'm just going to block the login outright. You probably would want to do maybe some kind of additional checking. Maybe you want to do some kind of, excuse me, some, maybe a one-time passcode or some kind of email link, some additional verification that just makes sure that this person is who they say they are and not someone trying to access their account without authentication. Excuse me, my voice is a little sore. So I just gotta have some tea to sound a little smoother. Okay, so now we've got this part of the code activated here. Let's go back to our login page. Now, I haven't done anything about our bot detection yet, but let's just see how we're working here so far. I'm going to reset our database, just make sure everything is all good, cleared out, and I'm going to log in. So let's pretend I don't have the password and I'm trying to log in as a nefarious user. I'm going to log in, invalid credentials, and I can keep logging in, right? I can keep trying a bunch of new things if I wanted to log in, but after a while, now there's too many login attempts, right? We hit that 5th one and that was enough. We try again later, you're doing too much. All right, now let's try it with our automated script. Again, I haven't added anything about bot detection just yet, but let's just see how this changes. So as a refresher, the last time, while we did have a few invalid credentials, we were able to get through all of these different accounts, right? We got through, what is that, 6 different accounts, all the way down to ZZ down here. Let's try it again now that we have the login attempts rate limited. So let's run that test script. Okay, so we did get through a few, right? We got through a few of them, but at the end here, we're no longer able to continue to keep trying, right? We've done too many login attempts. Now it's getting suspicious and doesn't matter if the credentials are correct or not, we are no longer able to log in, right? So our success text, if you would only have those first 3, still not great. I still don't want that. but we have improved at least on the rate limiting here. Now, this rate limiting, remember, it's based on our visitor ID, and that does not change even if I hop into incognito mode. So let's say, for example, let me open up a new incognito window here. Let me copy this location. Okay, so I am now in incognito, okay? And let's say I try and log in here. Let's just put anything, just a random password. I try and log in. Doesn't matter. Too many login attempts. It still detects that I'm the same, same browser here. It's the same device, etc. If I was on my mobile phone, same thing would be the same device, and I can't try and get around that rate limit. Okay, so now let's do this last piece here and bring in the bot detection. So again, we're looking at the full event results. It's in the bot D, bot detection section, data bot result. Like I mentioned before, this result can either be good, bad, or not detected. In this case, I only want to allow people where the result is not detected. Anything other than not detected, I don't want to allow a login. So I can check that result here, right? I can go through the result and say a bot is detected if this result equals anything other than not detected, okay? And if a bot is detected, then we're going to again return that false success result. And we'll also log the attempt as a failure as well. But we'll see that the result here is login failed, bot detected. Now, I am using the output here very specifically, so for the demo purposes, so you can see that the bot detection is happening. Of course, you wouldn't want to actually expose the reason why the login failed here. Again, this is just for demo purposes. All right, so with that bot detection on, if I go back to our login page here, let me make sure I reset my demo database, relog everything. You'll see that I can log in just fine, right? If I have the right password, I can log in just fine. Don't have to do any CAPTCHAs or any puzzles or hurdles. Your regular, real, legitimate users are unaffected. They can log in perfectly fine. They have a great user experience. However, let's now try our bot script again and see how far it gets this time. Okay, as you can see, wasn't able to log in at all anytime, not even once. Got the login fail, that same bot detected message every single time, right? So now you can see how you kind of layer these different things together. The bot detection itself is going to block any kind of automated scripts that are trying to attack your login page, trying to do some kind of credential stuffing or kind of account takeover. And then you have the visitor ID, which can also help you to rate limit, even if it's not a bot, to help you protect your login page even further. All right, let me swap back now to our slides just to wrap it up. Let me see here. All right, so we talked about a bunch of different things. I hope that you can now get an idea of how you can use the bot detection as well as our visitor ID to go through and protect yourself from some of those use cases that we mentioned earlier. We talked about, I showed you the credential stuffing example here, right? So you can add bot detection on that login page. When they click on login, check if it's a bot. Use our other signals as well, right? You want to check to see, is it, are they using some kind of virtual machine? Are they tampering with their browser? You can go through and check those things before login. You can also stop bots from stealing your content or scraping your content. You can do things to check if you want to return a response. You can say, hey, first let's check on the bot detection. If it is detected as a bot, maybe you don't return certain content or proprietary information. Maybe you return a limited data set of information instead, for example. You can also do things to prevent, inventory hoarding, making sure that only real users are able to access your sales or your new product launches or get those, I don't know, what's hot right now? Pokemon cards? That seems to be the hot thing nowadays. You can protect your inventory basically from anyone that's trying to use, those scalping bots to swoop in and get high or limited items. And of course, you can filter your fake signups. Again, on the sign up page, we showed the login page today. Same thing can happen on your sign up page. Maybe you want to make sure to stop bots from making new accounts. Maybe you want to track and see if a visitor is making an unusual amount of new accounts. Maybe they're trying to abuse some kind of referral program, for example, to pretend to be a bunch of different people when really it's just the same one. We also have customers that do this for things like abusing free trials or abusing free tiers. For example, let's say you allow a certain amount of storage, and if you want to abuse that, you can make a bunch of fake accounts, and now you can add up all these things to get a bunch of fake storage when really you should have only gotten a small limited amount. So all of these use cases can be stopped with the same methods and techniques that I just showed you in that live demo, right? Checking the visitor ID, comparing it to previous actions, and using the bot detection signal to determine if you want to block the action or challenge it, or maybe allow it, but then maybe monitor it later on for review. It's really up to you. Basically, we give you all this data that you can use. You can either use it, directly to help you make decisions. You can use it as part of your, risk signaling, for example, if you want to have your own models. Maybe you've got your own machine learning models you want to pipe that stuff into. It's all up to you, but it's the same idea for every use case. Now, the best way, of course, to go about preventing and blocking bots is to have a multi-layered approach. Like I mentioned, we have a bunch of other smart signals as well. So you want to combine these smart signals together. One that I really like to highlight is our suspect score. The suspect score basically is like an amalgamation of all of our other smart signals. And so if you are maybe just getting started with Fingerprint, you're brand new, you don't know which signals to look at, which ones to use, the suspect score basically gives you a single number, right? That single number that looks at all of our smart signals and basically tells you, hey, this user is suspicious. They have a high amount of these smart signals that have been flagged, right? And the more anomalous a certain smart signal is, the higher that number will be. So you can then say things like, hey, you can log in, but your suspect score is really high, and therefore we want to add some additional friction to log in just to make sure that it's really you. Of course, additionally, like I mentioned before, using an IP address by itself is not enough to really protect your login pages or any of these pages as well, and to use as your way for enforcing rate limits. You want to use visitor ID, for example, additional data points to actually try and monitor these bots or automated scripts that are on your website. However, you can, of course, still use IP address. We have customers, actually, there's a great tutorial on our website. That same demo.fingerprint.com also has a demonstration of this. Some of our customers will use bot detection to detect that IP address and then add it back to their web application firewall. So, multiple layers. Don't just rely on the IP address, but use a bunch of things together. And as I've been mentioning so far, make sure you use some kind of risk-based assessment, decisioning. Don't necessarily have to block every single thing, right? Some actions, maybe it's okay if a bot does a certain action on your website, depending on what the action is. You can decide what your response should be based on the data that you're receiving from Fingerprint and other inputs as well. And then, of course, make sure you're always monitoring, the identifications, bot activities. Make sure you've got some kinds of dashboards, analytics, and alerts set up, because this, along with the different detection techniques, can really give you a full view of what's happening on your site and help you to stop these bad bots from being malicious. So next steps, of course, bots are continuing to evolve. There are always going to be new techniques, new tactics, new evasion methods. I mentioned before how AI is making this a lot easier for folks. Not only do we now have agentic AI that can take action on behalf of users, and in some cases that's great, right? That allows us to do monotonous tasks really easily. It's great for accessibility as well. However, it also opens up a whole brand new attack vector for fraudsters. So, continue to change and think about how you are detecting bots what a bot actually looks like, continue to evolve your defenses as well. We are always continuing to do research at Fingerprint. We have a fully dedicated research team that is constantly looking at, new bot detection techniques, but also new identification techniques. What are the new browser updates look like? How are fraudsters, trying to evade things? So we're constantly doing that research for you, so you don't have to worry about trying to keep up with it. Like I mentioned before, Fingerprint will give you those real-time actionable verdicts you can use in the back end. It doesn't have to be annoying for your real legitimate customers. Everything happens behind the scenes. And of course, I can't reiterate this enough, continue to layer the different tactics. Use other smart signals, right? Use multiple types of tooling, detection, etc., to give yourself the best defenses. So if you want to learn more, you can head to fingerprint.com/botd, right? Bot detection. So /botd to learn more specifically about our bot detection and how you can use it. Or if you want to try it out yourself, maybe you want to try your hand at a sample like this, you want to try it out in your own local environment, sign up for a free trial. You can use our APIs with an unlimited free trial for 14 days. We also have a free tier as well if you want to get a little more time with it as well to try it out. But if you want to see how it really works, fully action, that free trial is your best bet, and you can give it a shot and actually see it in action live for yourself. But at this moment, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to some Q&A. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, etc., go ahead and type it into the Q&A, and I will take a look and see what questions we have. All right, let me take a look here. I think I had seen some things pop up as I was going through. Looks like we do have a few things. Okay, let me see here. Okay, someone's asking, how do we get the bot detection reason from which signal we stopped? So right now we offer you, let me go back to the demo playground here. You can see all of the different types of things that we provide to you here. This will maybe sometimes include some things like the user agent, that might include some things like, oh, it's, Puppeteer, Selenium, etc. But this is the data that we will provide to you as far as what the detection actually is. So you give you a few other additional details here, but the main result is this good, bad, or not detected. Let's see. Got a couple more questions. We have developer first product. In few cases, developers are integrating our API into their front end or mobile app. We don't have control over that. They're not using Fingerprint. Although our in-house app that we have built, we are using Fingerprint Enterprise. We got good results, but how do we handle the API used by the end client directly? You might want to reach out to our partnership team. They can kind of guide you on how to use Fingerprint as kind of like it sounds like you're doing some kind of like OEM type of thing. So they would be the best ones to talk about how you actually do that if you are trying to use Fingerprint in like a third party perspective. So they would be the best ones to reach out to. You probably can get in touch with them if you go to our sales contact page, but they can help you with that. How do you design bot protection systems so they don't add significant latency under peak traffic? Well, this is kind of a two-part question. I think there's the one part of how do we ensure that we're not adding latency to your site, as well as how do you ensure you're not adding latency to your site. So for the first part, we are constantly trying to trim down our latency. And again, if you try that for yourself, you'll see that we really don't add too much latency to our to your login flows, your checkout flows, etc. We also have options for you to make it even faster. Today, I showed you the example where you do the identification request on the front end, and then you send the request ID to your back end, and then you do a second request for the full identification event. That's just one way that you can get that information. We also have a technique called sealed client results, which eliminates that second request if you need a really fast response. And instead, what you get is you get that full server API response. It comes in the very first response in the front end. However, it's encrypted. So all you need to do then is you send the entire response to your backend, you decrypt it, but that means one less request, right? One less loop back and forth, so you can improve that latency. So we have a couple of different ways that you can go about actually getting that response that can help you to decrease the latency on the fingerprint side. As far as on the customer side of your own design and your own type of implementation, there are a few things that you can do. We have some customers that will do the identification and still allow the action to go through, but then use that data later on as some kind of like retroactive response. That's one thing that you can do. You also can decide, how you want to use these pieces of information in your server side. So here we went through, I'm not gonna bother going back to show you the code, but we went through kind of, okay, we have to go through all these different checks to determine the login. You can change how those checks work, what checks actually are happening before, after, during, right? Maybe you do a check before the user actually logs in preemptively to prevent them from logging in, for example. So there are a few things that you can do both with Fingerprint and how you implement it, as well as your own logic to kind of reduce latency as much as possible. Let's see, a couple more questions. Let me see here. Okay, Fingerprint's code is publicly available. Additionally, attackers can read the obfuscated or minified JavaScript code on the client side and bypass the smart signals or just replicate a victim's visitor ID. My question is, how does Fingerprint protect against these manipulations of browser properties and functions? This is a great question. So let me start from the top here. So a few things. Fingerprint's code is publicly available. It was the first thing you said here. The client agent code, so that little snippet that we imported at the very top of the front end logic, that client code that loads up how we collect the data points and sends it over to Fingerprint, that particular piece of code is public, right? You can see the script because of course you're loading it in your browser. It is there, it's available, you can look at it. However, what is not publicly available is what we actually do with that data. It's not publicly available how we crunch those numbers, do analysis, and it's also not publicly available the information that we return to you. So we don't return to you that whole smart signals payload in the front end because, like I said, it's perfectly available and open for anyone to try and manipulate. So some parts of the code technically are available, like the client itself, but the magic that happens behind the scenes to generate the visitor ID, that kind of thing, those patterns, that does not happen in the front end. A lot of our competitors or even some kind of open source tools, all that stuff happens in the front end. So it's very easy to try and manipulate and kind of get around it. Ours does not. The next thing you talked about is, bypassing smart signals by replicating the victim's visitor ID. Great question. We have multiple ways for you to stop and detect replay attacks. So the first thing is by using that request ID instead of using the visitor ID directly. Now, there's a few things you can do there. First, we have a bunch of ways you can detect if a request ID is being replayed. We have a full page in our documentation that talks about how you can go through and harden those detections. I didn't show it today in today's demo because this would take up too much time. But basically, you can do things like checking the timestamp, checking the origin. We have a full description in our documentation to help you harden those checks to see if it has been replayed. And then the second thing that we also have is a check for replaying on the actual signal collection, right? So it's kind of two phases. There's a phase where you're sending that request ID to the backend, right? That part can be replayed. I could try and hack or manipulate what's happening. Maybe I got someone's visitor ID from a legitimate user somewhere else, and now I'm trying to like replay it in your identification. So that first part helps you check for that and block that. The second part is the actual signal collection. Maybe I was able to put malware on a legitimate visitor's computer, and I was able to like get a copy of all of their signals, right? All those input signals. And now I'm trying to replay those signals that are being sent to Fingerprint we also have detection for that. So a part of the response that you'll get back will actually say replay true false. So that's an additional signal we give to you. So on both sides of the spectrum, both on the fingerprint identification side, as well as the sending that information back to your server side, we have protections to help you detect and stop replay attacks. Because this is our customers also had that question as well. And so that's how we help them too. But that's a great question. Thank you for asking that one. Oh, a couple more questions are coming in. All right, let's see. How does Fingerprint decide what is a good or a bad bot? The basics around this are looking for known, known and well, what's what I'm looking for? Well documented, but also things that like announce themselves, right? Well-known search engines, those types of things. So it's not necessarily looking at like what it's exactly doing. We're looking at types of things like, okay, do we know that this is like the Google search engine crawler, for example? Those are what we determine are good bots. Otherwise, it's a bad bot. And otherwise, if it's not detected, then we give you not detected. Let me see. I think there's two more questions. What's this one? Boo, 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 boo. Okay, our websites are under constant attack by bots that use rotating proxies and try to exhaust or use up our hosting resources bandwidth. Most of these bots use compromised Microsoft, AWS, or Google Cloud servers. We're currently handling it using Cloudflare, but is there anything else we can do? Any suggestions? Great start using Cloudflare as well to get that kind of first level of bot detection, that network level bot detection. Because as I showed you today, our bot detection is more so on the client side. I totally agree with you using Cloudflare there. Things you can do in addition to that, of course, you have the actual bot detection I showed you today. But since you're talking more so about like hosting resources, bandwidth, that kind of thing, I mentioned earlier that example that we have in our demo. Again, the link, I think Delvin put the link in the chat, demo.fingerprint.com. If you go there, there's a bot detection web application framework, oh my God, firewall. Too many words. There's a great example there of how you can use our client-side bot detection to get that IP address and then automatically add that to your firewall. So you can, if you're using Cloudflare, for example, I think actually the example I think also uses Cloudflare. So you can actually see how that would work. So you can use that to automatically add these malicious bots. So instead of you trying to like manually whack-a-mole these bots, like you said, they're using all kinds of different compromised servers. Those are constantly changing. That's one thing that you can do to kind of help to mitigate that. So you're not constantly trying to figure out like where's it coming from now? Where's a new server? Let's see. Okay, this is the last question I'll take for now. Your demo was for a simple user password. Is fingerprint necessary for MFA use? Great question. I think it is still necessary for MFA use. MFA can also be bypassed. It's definitely a lot harder than just a user and password or anything like that, of course, but it is still able to be bypassed. We can talk about things like, session stealing, cookie hijacking, etc., can get you right by MFA. So yes, I do consider fingerprints still necessary for MFA use. We probably would use it in a couple of different ways. The first thing I would think about is comparing previous logins to current logins, and also using it as a way to decide if you want to step up and ask for that MFA. So for example, let's say I log in from my normal device, visitor ID 123. I log in from maybe that device, my phone, and maybe my tablet. You've got like a set of 3 visitor IDs that I normally log in from. If you see that visitor ID, no need to ask for an additional form of authentication because you are recognizing it, right? That visitor ID itself becomes an additional factor, right? The idea of like something you own, right? Something you have. So you can use it as an additional factor, which means for your legitimate users, they get a great smooth experience because you are able to recognize them. You say, oh yeah, we recognize that this is one of Keshia's, 3 or 4 devices that she usually logs in from. Go ahead, let her log in. We're feeling confident on that. Or let's say I log in from a new device. Now, I could just have gotten a new phone, sure, maybe, or it could be someone trying to hack my account. In that case, of course, show the MFA. right? So it's kind of a nice way to not only add an additional layer of protection, but it also allows you to improve your user experiences. I cannot tell you how many times I personally, now that I've joined Fingerprint, I've been here for a couple of years, I see so many websites that I have to interact with myself where I'm like, if you would just actually recognize my device, it would make things so much easier. It gets so annoying to constantly have to add, some kind of additional level for MFA. So I think it can be used kind of in both ways. An additional layer, it's an additional factor that you can add in, as well as a way to say, hey, we recognize you. We're not going to bother you every single time you kind of log in. Okay, so that's it for the questions for today. At this point, we're going to go ahead and log off and end the webinar. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can go to the contact sales form. You can try it out for yourself. We also have a Discord channel if that's your thing, but feel free to reach out to us. And I hope you guys learn more about bot detection today in general, as well as how Fingerprint can help you protect your websites and your applications. That's it for now. Hope you have a great rest of your day.